My husband's family cut me out of their lives for 7 years, and the moment I finally had something worth taking, they showed up at my architecture firm with a stack of legal papers and a demand that I hand over half of everything I had built. I am 32 years old. I am the founder and principal architect of a boutique design firm in Austin, Texas. Before I tell you what happened the afternoon they walked through my front door, you need to understand what it cost me to get here. Let me know in the comments where you are watching from, and if you have ever had someone try to claim your success as their own after doing everything in their power to destroy you. Because trust me, you are going to want to hear how this ended. It was a Tuesday in late October, the kind of afternoon in Austin where the heat finally breaks and the air smells like cedar and something close to relief. My firm Meridian Studio occupied a converted warehouse space in the east side. Exposed brick walls, high ceilings, drafting tables lined under a row of steel-frame skylights. I had designed the renovation myself, working weekends for 3 months straight. Every beam, every light fixture, every inch of that space represented something I had clawed back from rock bottom. I was standing at my main drafting table, reviewing elevations for a mixed-use development when my office manager, the most unflappable woman I have ever met, appeared in the doorway with an expression I had never seen on her face before. It was not panic exactly. It was the particular look of someone who has just encountered something that does not make sense. She told me there were people in the lobby asking for me. She said they did not have an appointment. She said one of them had a briefcase and was talking very loudly about legal matters. My pen stopped moving on the page. I knew before I even stood up. The last time I had seen my former mother-in-law, I was 25 years old, sitting in a parking lot outside a Kroger in the rain, having just been handed a box of my belongings by my then-husband. We had been married for 14 months. His family had orchestrated the divorce so methodically and so completely that by the time the papers were filed, I had lost my home, my savings account, which we had foolishly combined, my professional references, and the interior design contract that had been my entire financial foundation. My former mother-in-law had personally called the project developer and told him I was unstable and unreliable. She used the word unhinged. She said it more than once. What she did not know, what none of them knew, was that I had recorded that phone call. For 7 years, I did not contact them. I did not respond to the single voicemail my ex-husband left 2 years after the divorce, which consisted mainly of him explaining that he hoped there were no hard feelings. I rebuilt. I went back to school and finished my architecture licensure. I worked as a junior drafter for a firm downtown for 4 years, saving aggressively, living in a studio apartment so small I had to fold my drafting table against the wall to open the bathroom door. I did not take vacations, I did not buy furniture I could not carry myself. I kept every receipt, every bank statement, every professional contact in a system so meticulous it bordered on obsessive. Because I had learned at 25 years old, standing in a parking lot in the rain, that the only thing standing between me and total erasure was documentation. I founded Meridian Studio 3 years ago with a business partner I trusted completely, and a line of credit I had spent 18 months qualifying for. Within 2 years, we had won a regional design award and landed a contract with a commercial developer that tripled our revenue. My name was in the Austin Business Journal. A national architecture publication ran a profile on our adaptive reuse projects. That was when they resurfaced. I walked out of my drafting room and through the open studio floor toward the lobby. My employees glanced up from their screens. A few of them had clearly already seen the visitors through the glass partition and were making the particular effort of pretending to be extremely focused on their work that people make when something uncomfortable is happening nearby. My former mother-in-law was standing in the center of my lobby. She was wearing a pale linen blazer, the kind she always wore when she wanted to convey authority without appearing aggressive. My ex-husband stood slightly behind her and to the left, which was exactly where he had always stood in relation to her. Close enough to be present, far enough back to avoid accountability. Beside him was a man I did not recognize, compact and expressionless, holding a leather briefcase with the specific stillness of someone who is paid by the hour. My former mother-in-law did not look surprised to see me. She had clearly rehearsed this. She opened with my first name and a smile that did not reach her eyes. She said it had been too long. She said I looked well. She said she was glad I had found my footing. I stood at the front desk and did not move toward her. She pivoted without pausing. She said that the family had become aware of my firm's recent success and that in light of certain circumstances, they felt it was appropriate to revisit some unresolved financial matters from the marriage. The man with the briefcase stepped forward and placed a thick document on the edge of my front desk. He introduced himself as their attorney. The document was a claim for marital asset division, filed 7 years late, leveraging an obscure provision in Texas family law regarding deferred compensation and professional licensing acquired during the marriage period. The argument, as far as I could parse it standing there in my own lobby, was that because I had been pursuing my architecture license during our marriage, the value of that license, and by extension, any professional success it generated, was partially a marital asset my ex-husband had never received his portion of. They were claiming 25% of Meridian Studio. My ex-husband finally spoke. He said he had not wanted to do this. He said he had tried to protect me from his mother's plan for years. He said he still cared about me, and that this was purely a legal formality that would be much easier if I cooperated. His voice had the particular texture of someone reading from a script they had been handed very recently. I looked at the three of them standing in the lobby of the firm I had built, with 7 years of relentless, grinding work. I looked at the attorney's briefcase and my ex-husband's rehearsed regret and my former mother-in-law's pale linen blazer. I said very evenly that I would need a moment. I walked back through the studio, past my employees who were now genuinely not looking at their screens, and into my private office. I closed the door. I sat down at my desk. I opened the bottom drawer and pulled out a thick accordion folder that I had maintained and updated every 6 months for the past 7 years. It was labeled, simply, with the year of my divorce and a case number. I had always known this day was possible. Not probable, but possible. I picked up my phone and called my attorney, a woman named, well, I have been calling her my attorney for years, which is what she is. She answered on the second ring. I told her what was happening. She told me to do exactly one thing: keep them there. I walked back out to the lobby. I told my former mother-in-law that I appreciated them coming in person. I said these conversations were always better face-to-face. I said I had a conference room available and that we should sit down properly. She smiled. It was the smile of a woman who believes she has already won. I led them through the studio to our largest conference room at the back of the building. It had glass walls on 2 sides, a long walnut table, and enough seating for 12. I had designed it specifically so clients could see the entire studio floor while we met, the implicit message being that this was a serious operation staffed by serious people. I had never considered that someday I would use it as a containment space. I offered water. Their attorney declined. My ex-husband accepted and then looked immediately regretful about it, as if accepting water had somehow weakened his legal position. My former mother-in-law sat at the far end of the table and placed her hands flat on the surface in a gesture I remembered from every difficult conversation I had ever had with her. A signal that she was prepared to wait me out indefinitely. She said she hoped I understood that this was not personal. She said the law was the law. She said that during our marriage I had been enrolled in my licensure program and that my ex-husband had financially supported the household while I studied, which in the eyes of Texas family law created a legitimate claim to the professional assets that education produced. I listened to all of it. I did not interrupt. Then I asked her one question. I asked her how much my ex-husband had contributed to the household during our 14-month marriage. She looked at her attorney. He said the exact figure was a matter for discovery. I said that was interesting, because I had a figure. I pulled a single sheet of paper from the accordion folder I had carried in with me and slid it to the center of the table. It was a summary my own attorney had prepared 3 years ago, when I first started building real revenue and updated my contingency documentation. It showed that during our marriage, my ex-husband had contributed $11,000 to our joint expenses. It showed that I had contributed $43,000. It showed that $18,000 had been withdrawn from our joint savings account 4 days before he filed for divorce. A withdrawal I had never authorized and had never been able to legally recover, because at the time I could not afford the litigation. My former mother-in-law's attorney leaned forward and looked at the document. My ex-husband stared at the table. My former mother-in-law's hands, still flat on the surface, pressed slightly harder into the walnut. I said, still evenly, that I also had the recording. She looked up. I said that 7 years ago, she had placed a phone call to a commercial developer named, and I used his full name and the name of his company, And during that call, she had made several statements about my professional character that directly resulted in the termination of a contract worth $62,000. I said I had the recording of that call. I said my attorney had reviewed it and was of the opinion that it constituted tortious interference and defamation, and that the applicable statute of limitations in Texas had not yet expired. The room was very quiet. The attorney set down his pen. I said I was going to tell them how the next 30 minutes were going to go. My attorney was on her way to the building. When she arrived, she would be presenting them with a counterfiling that documented the unauthorized withdrawal from our joint account, the recorded phone call, and a calculation of the professional and financial damages I had sustained as a direct result of my former mother-in-law's interference. The counterfiling also included a request for a deposition, during which I would be asking my former mother-in-law, under oath, to explain the phone call. I told them that if they wanted to proceed with their claim for 25% of my firm, I was absolutely prepared to let a judge evaluate both filings simultaneously. My ex-husband turned to his mother. The rehearsed regret on his face had been replaced by something rawer and less composed. He said her name, just her first name, which I had almost never heard him use, and said he had told her this was not a good idea. She ignored him. She was looking at me. She said I was being vindictive. She said I was weaponizing old grievances to avoid a legitimate legal obligation. She said that a woman in my position, with my profile in the community, should think very carefully about the kind of legal battle I was inviting. She said things could get very complicated, very publicly, very fast. I had spent 7 years waiting for her to threaten me again. I had spent 7 years preparing for exactly this moment, and sitting across from her in the conference room of the firm I had built from nothing, I felt something I had not expected. I was not afraid. I was not even angry. I was, in the most complete sense I can describe, entirely calm. I said that I had thought about it. I said I had been thinking about it for 7 years. I said that I had also spoken, over the past 6 months, with 2 other women who had left situations involving her son, both of whom had experienced what they described as coordinated professional interference following the end of those relationships. I said both of them had kept documentation. I said both of them had been in contact with my attorney. My former mother-in-law's composure did not break. I will give her that. But something shifted behind her eyes, a very small recalibration like a building settling. Her attorney leaned over and said something quietly into her ear. She sat back in her chair. My ex-husband put his face in his hands. 40 minutes later, my attorney arrived. She sat down across from their attorney, and they spoke in the specific low, clipped register that attorneys use when the performance portion of a negotiation has ended. Within 20 minutes, they had agreed to withdraw the claim. In exchange, I agreed not to file the counterclaim. For now. My attorney inserted that phrase deliberately and audibly, and watched their attorney write it down. As they gathered their papers and prepared to leave, my former mother-in-law stood and smoothed the front of her blazer. She looked at me one final time. She said that I should know she had only ever wanted what was best for her son. I said that I understood. I said I had believed that once, a long time ago, and that it had cost me a great deal. But I said it without heat. There was no version of this moment that required me to be cruel, because cruelty would have meant she still had enough power over me to provoke it. She walked out through the studio. Her attorney followed. My ex-husband lingered for a moment in the doorway of the conference room. He looked at the floor and then at me and then at the floor again. He said he was sorry. He said it the way people say it when they mean I am sorry this happened, but not I am sorry I let it happen. I said I knew. He left. I stood in the conference room for a moment after the glass door clicked shut. Through the glass walls, I could see my employees. A few of them watching now, no longer pretending otherwise. My office manager caught my eye from across the studio floor and raised both eyebrows in a question. I gave her a small nod. She exhaled visibly. I walked back to my drafting table. I picked up my pen. I looked at the elevation drawings I had been reviewing when the afternoon derailed, and I found my place and kept working. That was 4 months ago. Last month, I signed the lease on a second studio space. We are expanding into a satellite office in San Antonio to support a municipal contract we landed in the fall. I hired 2 new junior architects and a project coordinator. The accordion folder is back in the bottom drawer of my desk, updated, because I am not naive enough to believe that one withdrawal is a permanent resolution. But here is what I have been thinking about since that afternoon, the thing I want to say directly to whoever is listening to this right now. When they told me at 25 that I was unstable, I believed them a little. Not completely, but enough that it slowed me down. Enough that I second-guessed my own memory of events, my own read of situations, my own sense of what I deserved. That is what that kind of sustained, deliberate undermining does. It plants a seed of doubt that is designed to grow in the dark, in the quiet moments when you are alone and exhausted, and starting over in a studio apartment so small you have to fold your drafting table against the wall to open the bathroom door. What I know now is that the doubt was not evidence. It was a strategy. It was meant to keep me small enough to be manageable and just uncertain enough to never push back. I pushed back. And the thing they could not have anticipated, the thing that made their plan fall apart the moment they walked into my lobby, was that I had spent 7 years not just rebuilding. I had spent 7 years preparing. I had kept every receipt. I had maintained every file. I had spoken to an attorney before I had the revenue to justify it because I understood that documentation is not paranoia. It is armor. If you have been written off by someone who then tried to walk back into your life the moment you had something worth taking, I see you. The people who call you unstable when you refuse to be controlled are not diagnosing you. They are warning you that you are harder to manage than they planned. Stay hard to manage. Document everything, and remember that the calls-missed person in the room is almost always the one who came prepared. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to Uplifting Stories. Share this with someone who needs to hear it today. Drop a comment telling me where you are watching from, and if you have ever had to protect what you built from someone who tried to take it, tell me your story. I read every single one.